Welcome. You have arrived in a place where nothing is demanded of you. There is no task to complete, no name you must remember, only time. Long before the world was shaped by memory, before the lands were broken and renamed, there was a light that did not burn, but rested. This was Valinor, a land beyond the sea, where the days did not hurry forward and the nights were never empty. Here, even silence had a voice. The air did not stir unless it wished to. The trees did not grow impatient with the passing years. And those who walked beneath their branches measured time not in hours, but in ages. In Valinor, nothing feared ending, because nothing truly ended. Light fell softly upon the hills, not from a single source, but as if the world itself remembered how to shine. And beneath that light, thoughts moved slowly, like clouds that had nowhere else to go. There were no roads carved by urgency. No footsteps echoed with purpose. Every journey was a continuation, not a beginning. If you listen closely, you might imagine the sound of water, moving without direction, content simply to exist. This was a place untouched by haste, untouched by loss, and yet, even here, change waited patiently, not as an enemy, not as a warning, but as a quiet truth. Some who dwelled in this light began to look beyond it, not out of dissatisfaction, but curiosity. They wondered what lay beneath unfamiliar stars, what forests might grow where this light did not reach. And so, without urgency, without sorrow, the thought of departure was born. Not as an end, but as a gentle turning. For even in the undying lands, time does not stop. It only sleeps, and now, as you listen, you may let your own thoughts do the same. In Valinor, silence is not empty. It is full of things that no longer need to speak. Here, time does not press forward. It rests like light upon still water. The Valar do not hurry, and the world itself breathes slowly. Paths are worn smooth not by passing feet, but by ages of quiet remembrance. No shadow reaches this land, for even memory here is gentle. Yet beyond the western shores, change is already stirring. A world is awakening elsewhere, under stars that have never known this peace. Before the sun rose, before the moon found her path, there were only stars. Beneath their quiet light, the world was still young, untouched by haste or hunger. By the waters of Cuivianen, the first voices awoke. Not in fear, but in wonder. They opened their eyes to a sky already watching them. The stars did not speak, yet they were understood. In that gentle darkness, memory was born before history. No crowns were worn, no names were carved in stone. There was only awareness. and the slow realization of being alive in a world vast and listening. The night did not end them. It welcomed them. And so the firstborn awakened. Not to rule, not to conquer, but to behold. Under stars that would never fade from their songs. They lingered beneath the stars, not knowing time, only rhythm. The water moved, and they listened. The wind passed through reeds and leaves, and they remembered. Even then, memory came easily to them. As if the world wished to be carried forward, they walked slowly, their steps light upon the earth. Leaving no mark but thought. The stars above were not distant lights. They were companions, steady and patient. Some learned their patterns. Some gave them names that would never be written. Only sung. Voices rose, soft at first. Then woven together. Not songs of sorrow, for sorrow had not yet found them. But songs of presence. I am here, you are here, and the world is wide. Night after night, they gathered beneath the same sky, and the stars did not change. This constancy shaped them. While all things moved and aged, the heavens remained. and so they learned stillness. They learned to wait without restlessness. To listen without impatience. Dreams came to them, not as escape, but as continuation. In dreams, the stars drew nearer. In waking, they carried that nearness within. No walls surrounded them, no roads guided them, yet they were not lost. The land itself recognized them and offered shelter without command. Trees bent gently, waters stayed clear. The world for a time was at peace with itself, and under that ancient sky, the firstborn understood that they belonged not above the world nor beneath it, but within it. Long before the call came, long before the journey began, they remained, listening to stars that would one day be missed. The call of the West. After the first awakening beneath the stars, a change came to the quiet lands of Middle-earth. The powers of the world became aware of the firstborn. They feared for them, for the shadows of darkness still moved unseen. And so a call was sent, soft, distant, and filled with promise. A call toward the west. Toward a land beyond the sea, where no shadow lingered, and time itself seemed to rest. Some of the elves listened. They gathered their people and began a long journey westward, walking beneath unfamiliar skies, crossing rivers older than memory, and lands that had never known footsteps before. Their road was slow, and the world changed as they passed through it. These were the ones who would one day behold Valinor, see the light that no star could match, and dwell for a time in peace, untouched by sorrow. But not all followed the call. Some paused and listened to the forests instead, to the rivers, to the whisper of leaves beneath starlight. Others never heard the summons at all, or chose not to answer it. They remained, they stayed where they had awakened, under the same stars that first looked upon them. These elves did not cross the sea. They did not walk the golden shores of the West, yet they became something else. They learned the language of Middle-earth. They grew with its forests, endured its long years, and carried its memory within them. While ages passed and powers rose and fell, they remained rooted, watchful, unchanging in their quiet patience. Thus the paths of the elves were divided. Some departed toward the light of the west. Others chose the long twilight of Middle-earth, and in that choice the fate of many ages was quietly set. Those who remained in Middle-earth. They did not refuse the call out of fear. Nor did they stay because they did not hear it. They simply remained. While others turned their eyes westward, toward the distant light beyond the sea, some elves lingered beneath the stars they first awoke under. The invitation reached them, carried on whispers and long journeys, yet not all followed it to its end. Some paused, some turned back, some never began the road at all, and so Middle-earth kept them. They dwelt among forests untouched by Valinor's radiance, where light filtered softly through leaves, and time did not rush forward. Rivers became familiar companions, trees learned their names, stones remembered their footsteps. They did not walk in the presence of the Valar, yet they were not abandoned. For Middle-earth itself shaped them. Their songs grew quieter, woven more with wind than with light. Their wisdom deepened slowly, rooted in patience rather than brilliance. They watched the stars turn through countless nights, each one unchanged, each one a reminder of the moment of awakening. Ages passed, the world shifted around them, yet they endured. Kingdoms rose and fell beyond their forests. Wars echoed at the edges of their lands. Still, they remained, not untouched, but unbroken. They became the keepers of means remembered by no one else. Paths known only to them. memories older than written words. In time, names were given to them, spoken by others seeking order, but names mattered little. What defined them was staying when the world changed, staying when the light faded, staying when time pressed forward. And as the long years wore on, their choice echoed quietly through the ages. Not all journeys are measured by distance. Not all destinies lie beyond the sea. Some are fulfilled by remaining. Those who accepted the call. When the elves first awakened beneath the ancient stars, their wonder was vast, yet the world around them was still young and uncertain. In those early ages, the powers of the West heard of their coming, and a summons was sent across the wide lands of Middle-earth. A call, gentle yet irresistible, inviting the firstborn to dwell in the blessed realm beyond the sea. Many listened. They turned their faces westward, leaving the starlit shores of their awakening behind. Their journey was long and slow, measured not in days, but in songs, memories, and loss. They crossed forests untouched by axe or fire, passed beneath mountains older than the moon, and followed rivers whose names would one day be forgotten. Some faltered, some lingered, but many continued on. At last, they reached the shores of the great sea, where the world itself seemed to end. There, white ships awaited them, silent as dreams, shaped by hands that knew no haste. Across the water they sailed, leaving Middle-earth behind in mist and distance. In Valinor, they found light unmarred, lands unmarred by shadow or decay. The two trees still shone, and time moved gently, without urgency or fear. These elves became known as the Eldar. The people of the great journey. Their voices grew wiser, their crafts more subtle, their memories deeper and more sorrowful, for though they dwelt in bliss, their hearts still carried echoes of starlight and Middle-earth. They remembered the forests they had walked, the rivers they had followed, and the kin they had left behind. And even in the undying lands, they would sometimes look east toward a world they would never fully forget. The waning peace of Valinor. Valinor was not born into silence. It became silent slowly. In the beginning, the blessed realm rested beneath an unchanging light. The two trees stood like living memories, one silver, one gold. Breathing time itself into the land. Their glow did not burn the eyes, it calmed the heart. Days passed without urgency, and nights carried no fear. The elves who reached Valinor believed they had arrived at the end of all journeys. Here, nothing aged in haste, nothing needed to be defended, nothing had yet learned how to fall. But even in a land untouched by death, unrest can take root. Melkor walked among the Valar again, not as a conqueror, but as one who listened. His voice was low, thoughtful, patient. He spoke of freedom, of restraint, of powers held back by those who claim to protect. And slowly, quietly, doubt entered Valinor. It did not arrive as a storm, it arrived as a question. Feanor heard those questions more clearly than most. His spirit burned brighter than the light around him, and his thoughts moved faster than the years. Where others were content, he wondered. Where others rested, he created. From his hands came the Silmarils, 3 jewels, each holding the unmarred light of the 2 trees. Not reflections, but living vessels of what once was pure and whole. They did not merely shine, they remembered. When the Silmarils were revealed, Valinor changed. The light of the trees was still there, but eyes no longer rested on it alone. Desire had found a shape. Melkor's gaze never left the jewels, and when the moment came, he acted. The trees were poisoned. Their light dimmed, then faded, leaving Valinor in a darkness it had never known. In that same silence, Melkor fled, carrying the Silmarils with him. For the first time, loss existed in the Blessed Realm. Grief followed swiftly, then anger, then oath. Feanor spoke words that could not be unspoken. An oath bound by pride, fire, and inevitability. The peace of Valinor fractured, not by force alone, but by choice. Melkor was named Morgoth. Chains held him once more, but the damage had already been done. Valinor would never return to what it had been. Some elves stayed, holding on to fading calm. Others turned their faces eastward, toward Middle-earth. toward exile, struggle, and story, and Valinor, once timeless, learned what it meant to remember. The silence returned, but it was no longer innocent. It was the silence after something precious has passed. The long road of exile, the elves who followed the shadow. The light of Valinor did not fade all at once. It dimmed slowly, like a memory that refuses to leave. After the breaking of the trees, sorrow settled deep within the hearts of the elves. Silence fell upon the white shores, and even the winds seemed hesitant to move. In that stillness, Melkor fled, and with him he carried more than the Silmarils. He carried unrest and a fire that could not be extinguished. Feanor's grief became a flame, and from that flame many followed. Not all elves chose the same path. Some remained, listening to the Valar, holding on to patience and hope. But others turned their faces eastward, toward the dark lands of Middle-earth, seeking justice or perhaps vengeance. Or perhaps something they could no longer name. So began the Great Exile. Beneath unfamiliar stars, the hosts of the Noldor marched. Their songs were quieter now, weighted with resolve and loss. The sea lay before them, wide, cold, unyielding, and when ships were denied, fate grew cruel. Across the grinding ice of the Helcaraxer they went. A land of endless night and bitter wind, where the cold spoke louder than words and the snow remembered every step. Many were lost there, not in battle, but to exhaustion, despair, and the quiet surrender of frozen breath. Kin was lost to kin. Hope thinned like mist beneath the pale stars, and yet they continued. For the oath still echoed in their hearts. When at last the survivors reached Middle-earth, they found a land both ancient and wounded. Forests stood silent, as if listening. Mountains watched with the patience of stone. This was no longer a land of awakening. It was a land of waiting. And so began the first age of the sun. Years passed, then centuries, and with them came wars that reshaped the world. Battles beneath the stars. Battles beneath the rising sun. The clash of light and shadow echoed across plains and mountains alike. Great realms rose and fell. The Elves fought not only against Melkor, now called Morgoth, but against the slow wearing of their own spirits. Victory was never without cost. Each triumph carried mourning in its wake. And still, the war continued. Dragons crawled from the deep places of the world. Fire consumed forests older than memory. Songs were sung for heroes who would never return, and the Silmarils, ever distant, ever burning. Time moved differently then. Years felt like moments, and moments like lifetimes. The stars watched as they always had, unchanged, while beneath them the world broke and was remade. Eventually, even Morgoth's shadow weakened, but the elves were no longer the same. Some would linger in Middle-earth for ages yet to come. Others would one day turn their thoughts back to the west toward the straight road. Toward healing. For now, the world rests. Let the wars fade into distant echoes. Let the ice melt back into memory. Let the stars remain, and as the ages pass, Middle-earth breathes. Slowly, quietly, waiting for the next tale to be told. The War of Wrath, the end of the Long Shadow. At the far edge of the First Age, when the wounds of the world had grown too deep to be ignored, the silence of the West was broken. From beyond the sea, the powers came at last. Not in haste, not in wrath alone, but with a resolve shaped by ages of watching. The Valar had long endured the sorrow of Middle-earth. The fading of the Elves, the grief of broken realms, and the slow spreading shadow of Melkor's dominion. Now, the waiting ended. The air itself seemed to change. Mountains trembled, the seas grew restless. The light of Amen returned to lands that had forgotten its warmth. This was no single battle, but a war that reshaped the world. Fire met thunder, the earth was torn and remade. Great hosts clashed beneath skies filled with ash and flame. Creatures born of darkness fell, their power broken like brittle stone. Strongholds that had stood for centuries crumbled into dust. And at last, Melkor himself was confronted. No longer the distant shadow behind all evil, but a defeated power, drained by fear, pride, and endless corruption. He was bound, cast down, removed from the circles of the world he had marred. The long night ended, yet victory came with a cost. The lands of Beleriand were broken and lost beneath the waves. Forests vanished, cities became memories, songs were left without places to be sung. For the elves, there was no triumph without sorrow. Many turned their gaze once more to the west. Feeling the call of the sea grow stronger in their hearts. Others remained, choosing memory over peace. And Middle-earth over Amman. Thus ended the First Age, not with joy, but with quiet understanding. That all things pass, that even victory fades into legend. And that the world, though saved, would never again be the same. As the echoes of war dissolved into silence, time itself seemed to slow. Stars remained, winds whispered through empty valleys. And the long history of Middle-earth flowed onward, carrying its grief, its beauty, and its fading light into the ages yet to come. Rest now, the war is over, the shadow has passed, and the world, wounded but free, returns to sleep.